When Namco's mega hit Xevious released in 1983, it struck all sorts of game sickos with its immaculate air combat and deep, mysterious sci-fi setting. Masanobu Endo, an artist-turned-programmer at Namco, was suddenly put in charge of the project after a staff reshuffle. This staff reshuffle paid off. His newness and youngitude, for lack of a better term, was significant to the project. He was inspired by the abundantly popular sci-fi of the time, and so Xevious appealed to the emerging generation of arcade-goers. As weird as it might sound to say this about a vertical shooter, the cinematic traits of Xevious were what caught people's attention. Its cryptic backstory was a little more advanced than the usual shooting game, and the sense of progression when fighting through the sky is tangible. But most importantly, listen to its sound design. That looping melody accompanying the action. The rhythm guiding you. Namco had great sound design in their games up to this point, and music was nothing new for the medium, but I don't know. This is pretty harmonious. Almost like you're playing an instrument and the instrument is Xevious. That looping accompaniment isn't the main melody, your input is. This aspect of the game sure is cool, but I mean, it's no big deal, right? In 1984, the music group Yellow Magic Orchestra had officially disbanded. Yellow Magic Orchestra were a pioneering electronic music group composed of 3 members, Sakamoto, Takahashi, and Hosono. At this time, each had their own successful careers in music and made the decision to simply spread outward on good terms. Earlier in the decade, Hosono and Takahashi established the Yen Records imprint, collaborating with a wider group of artists from their parent label Alpha to experiment and expand on what YMO established. Hosono in particular had a history of experimenting with varied sounds. He was already part of Happy End and Tin Pan Alley prior to establishing YMO. Splitting up was a great way to find more musical opportunities, to discover new sounds, and so the first thing he did was arrange an album named Video Game Music. In the late 70s and early 80s, these things called video games started to pick up cultural momentum, and some of those enamored by the beeps and boops decided to turn them into music. Yellow Magic Orchestra did so on their first album, sampling arcade game noises at the dawn of the Invader craze. Another group named Funny Stuff implemented Space Invaders samples into a disco song. But generally, game-to-music adaptations took more indirect approaches. Years later, though, as computer audio only advanced, Haruomi Hosono worked with Namco to put together this album, solely comprised of noises from their games. In an interview published for Login magazine in February 1984, Hosono talked with Xevious creator Masanobu Endo about his love for the game, so enamored with its sound design that he'd recreate it using a keyboard in his spare time. This inspiration spawned the idea of turning Namco's tunes into an album, arranged by Hosono with assistance from Endo and Namco's own music engineer Nobuyuki Onogi. The end result is a feat of forward thinking, and a testament to just how much Hosono really liked Xevious a lot. He loved it so much, in fact, that he also arranged Super Xevious, a looser remix of audio from the sequel of the same name and a certified Namco dance beat. I urgently need to make it clear that these releases are an enormous deal, not just for being the first or whatever, but for how game music was just so casually recognized by a musician this renowned. Hosono was looking into the future here, and his work just nonchalantly burst open the gates to a brand new genre. Video game music is symbolic, to me, of the graduation games made from just entertainment to a wider art form. Alpha's own Kazusuke Obi, the producer of video game music along with other miscellaneous records, saw the potential of these things, of these games. He swiftly established the GMO label to license and release even more game soundtracks, and that's it. Games are albums too now, that's all it is. New section in the record store, Ambassadors of Funk Mario Land remix, look at that. With the release of video game music, Endo too had noticed this growing perception of games as a wild new medium. After designing his other masterpiece, The Tower of Druaga, he left Namco and established a new kind of studio to facilitate this new kind of art form.
So, I hear you left Namco?
I established a new company, Game Studio, this past August.
Last June, when I appeared on You said, why not go freelance? That really helped me make up my mind.
Because Masanobu Endo is, like everyone, a Gundam freak.
No, my generation, the Gundam generation, we love to make up stupid reasons for every choice we make.
The first game Endo made away from Namco was Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam Hot Scramble for the Famicom. Yeah, so Gundam was a massive deal in the early 80s following the success of its compilation movie trilogy. A sequel series, Zeta Gundam, was produced and aired in 1985 to expand the brand, and its licensor Bandai had its eyes on the Famicom. Up to this point, the only Gundam games in existence were on computers, including a duology of graphic adventure games on the PC-88 and an action game for Bandai's own RX-78 computer, named after the mobile suit from the show. It wouldn't have made sense for Bandai to license a game for the Famicom, not until it began getting hugely popular around 1985. In reaction to this popularity, they began publishing games on the platform based on existing franchises, and trusted the newly formed game studio with the newly huge Gundam series. I'm not sure who approached who first, but this worked out for established Gundam head Endo and his new snazzy independent company. With their new resources, Game Studio experimented with Nintendo's hardware to create a sort of first-person elimination shooter based on Zeta Gundam. You would think that a 1986 Famicom FPS would be messy and hard to play, but it's actually a really tight, fun game given the limitations. Okay, I need to talk about this. Even though this version was totally fine, Bandai ordered it to essentially be made worse. After focus testing, the retail version was adjusted to be more linear, and they added these side-scrolling mazes so kids could see the Gundam in the game. They removed any sense of space with the enemies, and it just overall feels like it has nothing to do with the show. Instead of realizing its actual potential, they just watered it down based on market research. Shocking that Bandai would do such a thing. The music in Hot Scramble was put together by Nobuyuki Onogi, who had also moved from Namco to Game Studio. For this game, he was responsible for taking Zeta Gundam's opening and ending themes and transferring them to the Famicom sound hardware, but he'd also done the reverse with video game music. Because of his expertise, he formed an alliance with GMO's Kazusuke Obi to form Digital Entertainment, who not long after changed names to Citron and Art, so if you hear me say either name, they're the same thing, just to let you know, and collaborate on these soundtrack releases. Also, while all this was happening, a Russian guy invented Tetris at his computer school. At some point in 1984, a mathematician named Alexei Pajitnov was thinking about this pentomino block toy from his childhood and how cool it is that there are so many different ways to put them together. He got the idea to digitize them, then to scale the 5-block pentominoes down to 4-block tetrominoes, put some gravity in there, realized the space on the screen filled up too quickly, added a mechanic that removes rows of blocks automatically once they're filled up, and suddenly he was a game designer. His game was named Tetris. You should know what Tetris is, really. Once it was unleashed upon the world, gradually through a tangled licensing process, it spread fast like some kind of germ and became a bona fide Mega Smash Ultra hit, the likes of which had never really been seen. It was immediately popular with everyone, adaptable to all kinds of available hardware, and interpreted in different ways by different developers. Bulletproof Software, a development house known for its role-playing game, The Black Onyx, and run by full-time Go enjoyer Hank Rogers, had acquired the rights to release Tetris for Japanese computers. Bulletproof's history with such methodical games led to their version of Tetris being slow and somewhat forgiving, even featuring a lives system. On top of that, their Famicom version had to accommodate for a button-based input method, leading to one of the strangest and least intuitive ways to play a game that everyone knows how to play. At the same time as these computer versions was a much different arcade Tetris produced by Sega, who acquired the rights from Atari, following a long line of misunderstandings regarding the original contract with Andromeda Software, but that's really not important. Sega's version mastered the input side of things, and due to the arcade format, it was way faster and focused on reaction speed, to contrast with the existing mind game reputation that Tetris had. Suddenly, we have two variations on the same foundation, and both were popular. Put simply, the variations would not stop here. Once the Game Boy cemented Tetris as a worldwide phenomenon for good, there was some sort of pressure on developers to figure out how to make a Tetris 2. Sega tried it before it was even trendy, innovating with the variants Block Seed and Flashpoint, while Alexei Pajitnov himself came up with TETRIS, and someone, somewhere on this earth, had the idea to design welltris. Developers were desperate to iterate, having had enough of this robust yet simple formula, but the answer a lot of developers had was to just add more stuff, or to make a different game entirely. They really thought this was the only way forward for some reason. However, before long, a game with the title Tetris 2 would actually release, and it lived up to the hype. By 1989, the rights to Tetris had been pretty much sorted out in time for Nintendo to release the Game Boy version alongside Bulletproof. This version had adjusted the controls to be comparable to Sega's Tetris, and it's intuitive enough that it's still loved as one of several definitive Tetrises to this day. The chase to follow up on Game Boy Tetris perpetuated the question though, what does a Tetris 2 look like? In 1991, Bulletproof answered the question with Tetris 2 plus Bombliss, a game I played like 3 months ago and immediately fell in love with. Maybe it's all the prior versions I tried first, but Tetris 2 really left an impression. It's sublime, refining what already exists with compounded touches like how the pieces smoothly glide with your input and, not using the controls from that other Famicom version. In addition, Tetris 2 aesthetically strays away from that aggressive from Russia with fun theming, instead appearing more mellow with flowery decoration and enhanced visual clarity. Suddenly, Tetris has the same characteristics as a nice piece of furniture. These decisions tell me that Tetris had become so popular that the next logical step was to relax. We aren't selling people on exoticism anymore. Tetris is becoming a household name, and the appeal has widened significantly. There's no effort to make this look like some kind of forbidden delicacy of the Cold War, which basically every other version did besides Sega. Sega just kind of put a lizard in there. Because of the mass appeal that Tetris had gained by this point, Tetris 2 makes effort to be a premium, high-end product. It's this milestone of Famicom development, sort of a closing farewell in the face of a new decade, and this is all due to its development staff. Bulletproof were still responsible for publishing Tetris 2, but for this project our guy Hank handed the keys to the Tetris truck to Chunsoft. You may know them for developing this itty-bitty RPG series, Dragon Quest. If you are at all familiar with Dragon Quest, you might have noticed the musical similarities, maybe the most obvious giveaway. It was, in fact, composed by Dragon Quest mainstay and everyone's favorite war crime denier, Koichi Sugiyama. In addition, the game was directed by Chunsoft's main man, Koichi Nakamura, leading staff who had, in fact, also previously worked on Dragon Quest. You wouldn't think that their role-playing prestige would lend itself so well to a puzzle game like this, but they did know how to refine a game. They did so already. A lot. Because of Chunsoft's prestige, Tetris 2 stands out as a high-quality release that caps off an era of game development. Its distinct charm stems from these experienced developers, who had the capacity to gussy up a game already so renowned. Just one question though. Why is there a special thanks to Masanobu Endo? Once Citron and Art was established, the mission was not just to put out video game soundtracks. The company was formed with the intent to merge the two realms further, so their first big move was...
For 1986, I think that we'll probably see more adventure and role-playing games. Games using the Famicom disk system.
Yeah, it'll be easier to port those computer games over.
It's going to make all sorts of things possible that we couldn't do on carts. What new wonders will we see? That's my theme for 1986.
It has enhanced sound capabilities too, and the price will be cheaper. Honestly, I feel like I can't quite predict what kind of worlds it will reveal for us. Perhaps we will see a brand new type of game, something no one has ever seen before.
So back in 2023, I made this video about the origin of the rhythm game, specifically going over games that Masaya Matsuda from the music duo Size worked on before designing Parappa the Rapper, which is by conventional standards the first rhythm game. And it's like, sure, yeah, okay, but as I've since learned, Parappa the Rapper is not the first game to merge the two realms of music and game into a new genre. 9 years prior, some goofballs developed the musical shooting action game Otocky for the Famicom Disk System. These goofballs were part of a team known as CETIC. From what I understand, CETIC were a multimedia tech studio that specialized in music recording and computer graphics and probably other stuff too. Earlier in the decade, their studio was used by Haruomi Hosono and Friends of Earth for the production of non-standard music and SFX, his first album after video game music. Also made at the studio were Super Xevious and, quite frankly, an ocean of a bunch of music. CETIC were also a group of computer engineers who had animated at least a couple of short films, including one that made use of Hosono's aforementioned music. Also, there's a penis here. That's a penis, there's a penis on the screen. Later in the decade, CETIC were contracted to work on the visuals for various programs and provided their graphical expertise from animating penises to help produce stuff like Asada Akira's TV Evolution in 1986 and TV's TV in 1987. Aired only twice on 2 nights in March of 1987, TV's TV is really just a compilation of all kinds of cool stuff. It's a long, 4-hour behemoth that's easily recommendable if you want to see miscellaneous animation or nature films or cool game footage. The Amiga computer bumper graphics were put together by an engineer named Toshio Iwai, while the overall program was produced by some guy named Tsunekazu Ishihara. Later in 1987, CETIC helped on another show about how cool computer games are, by writer and TV personality Shigesato Itoi, called Shigesato Itoi's Great TV Game Museum. It's a lot like TV's TV in how it just sort of shows these things off, made with passion for a burgeoning medium through the lens of someone who doesn't design games. As such, game experts such as CETIC's own Akihiko Miura and magazine journalist Satoshi Tajiri provide their expertise on computer and arcade games. Itoi, meanwhile, interviews fellow writer Genichiro Takahashi and everyone's favorite war crime denier Koichi Sugiyama. Also, yes, Masanobu Endo is here. Why wouldn't he be? Learning about Shigesato Itoi's Great TV Game Museum messed me up for numerous reasons, but I want to focus on CETIC. Somehow, their contributions to the show set the stage for TETRIS 2. Here's the thing. When Otocky was developed, CETIC worked with Digital Entertainment, the original name for Citron and Art, the same company that produced Alpha's GMO Records, the same company founded by Nobuyuki Onogi and Kazusuke Obi. Those guys. Clearly, the aim with Otocky was to bring the worlds of game and music even closer, the very thing Citron was established for on the music production side of things. CETIC already had a working relationship with Alpha, so collaborating on a music game with their game music arm just makes sense. We already know that Masanobu Endo collaborated on video game music, but not long after he made an appearance on the NHK youth program U to talk games with Shigesato Itoi. Itoi was the host of U, and sitting alongside him during this episode was the show's theme composer, Ryuichi Sakamoto. You know, just another member of Yellow Magic Orchestra, you know, no big deal. Endo's appearance on this episode was the inciting incident that led to the establishment of Game Studio and Digital Entertainment.
You said, why not go freelance? That really helped me make up my mind.
Essentially, Itoi is the reason we got into this mess. So his appearance on this TV game museum show was sort of a full circle thing, really. It's a natural conclusion that a bunch of game lovers would come together like this, but learning all this really gives me the feeling there are just a handful of guys who just ended up having monumental effects on game culture through their shared passion of computer art. A couple years after Itoi's TV Game Museum, Japan had experienced the original Tetris boom, the Game Boy version was out, BPS was making big bucks, and it had a lot of fans, including CETIC's own staff. Key members of the team, producer Ishihara and game expert Miura, were hooked on Tetris and loved it a bunch, but thought the Famicom version was kind of ass. Secretly, Alexei Pajitnov also thinks it's ass and stated as such many years later. If TV Game Museum is proof of anything, it's that these SETIC guys were already palling around with notable folks of the video game world, journalists and developers alike. For instance, Ishihara's immense obsession led to his book, TETRIS Jumanten no Kaiho, which includes an interview with the very creators of the game, Pajitnov and Gerasimov. Miura, on the other hand, had apparently already worked with Chunsoft before joining SETIC. Approaching them to co-develop a better version of Tetris for Famicom would have been a simple matter, evidently, and Mr. Chunsoft himself, Koichi Nakamura, was into the idea. Tetris 2 plus Bombliss began development in 1989. I've gotta imagine, behind the scenes, that a lot of ideas were thrown around and development was all over the place, resulting in the loose participation of Miyamoto and Endo, as thanked in the credits of the game. In fact, Endo was there from the start, gathered as part of the Tetris 2 crew.
Bulletproof Software released a Famicom version of Tetris, but it left a lot to be desired. One of my colleagues at SETIC, Ishihara, had just put out a book on Tetris, and he was good friends with Pajitnov.
Ishihara was so obsessed with Tetris that he wrote a book about it, and he gathered me and Masanobu Endo together and entreated us. Let's make our own Tetris game.
The development took 2.5 years, but we wanted to redeem Tetris and really do it right this time, so we took our time.
Miura and Ishihara witnessed Tetris crash into the game world like lightning and aimed to harness it. They wanted to make it their own with the help of some of the most prestigious names tied to the Famicom, Ishihara even going to the extreme of traveling to Moscow just to try getting the rights.
On my second trip to Moscow with Arakawa and Lincoln, who do we meet in the lunchroom of the hotel? But it's Ishihara. What the hell is he doing here?
Tetris 2, delightfully, comes from a place of fan admiration. Our guy was just lucky enough to know all these other game devs already. Though Tetris 2 plus Bombliss started development in 1989, it took until 1991 to release. It's possible that it took so long because, among a pile of other projects capitalizing on Tetris, Ishihara worked with Pajitnov on Night Move for the Famicom Disk System. Night Move is a game Alexei Pajitnov developed earlier in the 80s, originally named Knight's Tour. He sold it to Joint Venture Dialogue, a Russian organization that imported and exported software, most notably an official localized version of MS-DOS for Russian computers. Unlike Tetris, Knight's Tour just wasn't published at all until this renamed disk system port. Considering Ishihara's role as producer for this game, I kind of wouldn't be shocked if, after failing to get the rights to Tetris in Moscow, he sorted something out with JV Dialogue to get Pajitnov's other existing puzzle game out in Japan. And this disk system version was, in fact, developed by Nintendo, marking the first time Ishihara directly worked with the company. I don't know, that just feels significant for some reason. Night Move is easily one of the most fun post-Tetris games Pajitnov worked on, and it's sweetened by tunes from Nintendo's own Chip Tanaka. It's kind of criminal that it's not talked about more. Though I don't know its full developer credits, it is quite possibly the reason why Miyamoto got a special thanks in Tetris 2 plus Bombliss alongside Endo. It isn't just tangential. Ishihara was actively collaborating with Nintendo parallel to his work on that game. But whatever, we're getting off topic. All you need to know is that Night Move is awesome and it possibly also contributed to Tetris 2 taking so long. If you get the chance, please check it out. It's buried in the software hole along with Nintendo's other late disk system games. They wouldn't dare let you play Time Twist. And, I mean, that's basically the story of how Tetris 2 plus Bombliss happened. These two studio engineers who loved Tetris so much that they produced their ideal, pristine version of the game, hand in hand with Pajitnov, Rogers, and Chunsoft. It's an underrated release, and I recommend it. Hey, what's that music slowly rising in the background? Contained within the liner notes of Haruomi Hosono's video game music is an essay written by Login Magazine's own editor, Fumihiro Nonomura. The essay outlines the phenomenon of game music, the association between actions and audio, and the intuition of young game players to pick up on these cues. Nonomura refers to such players as game freaks. Working alongside Nonomura at Login was Satoshi Tajiri. He was hired after producing the independent fanzine Game Freak, which gained popularity after publishing official guidebooks on xevious. One of these was Tajiri's own, published as Volume 2 of Game Freak, while the other, xevious Jumanten no Kaiho, was a joint publishing deal between him and another top player who he describes in this interview as a teen who played so many games that his parents told him off for it. That same teen was hired by Masanobu Endo to work on Hot Scramble, by the way. He's the president of a whole company now. Did Tajiri not know? Sooner or later, Satoshi Tajiri was an established go-to guy in the world of game coverage. His wide knowledge got him a guest feature on the show I mentioned earlier, Itoi's TV Game Museum, the center of our storm. After developing Tetris 2 plus Bombliss, Tsunekazu Ishihara and Akihiko Miura moved to work on a game called Mother 2. This was the sequel to Mother, the 1989 Famicom RPG, created by TV personality Shigesato Itoi. Their involvement was no doubt a result of their prior TV collaboration, but they'd also gained development experience from their prior work on Otocky, Night Move, and Tetris 2. For this project, Miura would be lead game designer, while Ishihara was lead producer and special effects artist. These battle backgrounds, known in the game's code as video drugs, seem to be inspired by Saichuan's own Laserdisc series from around the same time. From here, the pair stuck with Itoi's company, Ape Inc., until its eventual closure and reformation. Ape are primarily known for developing the Mother games, but with Ishihara on board, their catalog also included the very first in the nonogram puzzle game series, Picross, developed with our buddies at Jupiter. Not long after the release of Mother 2, Ape Inc. ceased operations and Ishihara led the way, founding Creatures Inc. as a direct successor. Creatures then collaborated with Game Freak to release a Game Boy game named When Nintendo and Square were co-developing the Famicom Disk System adventure game Miho Nakayama no Tokimeki High School, the company's president, Big Yamauchi, was concerned with reaching its target audience of young, babe-loving teens. As a result of this concern, he had personally invited Shigesato Itoi, public defender of video games, to give advice on the thing. This move was made out of desperation, at a time when I guess video games were getting shit as some sort of brain-rotting video goo only popularized by the Famicom boom. This meeting, arranged with the game's director, is why Itoi was later comfortable pitching Mother to the company. The development of this game led to the establishment of Ape Inc., and the establishment of Ape led to our two guys departing Setic. So, do we have Miho Nakayama to blame for this? In learning about the video game music album, the association between the music industry and the game industry became crystal clear to me. Itoi, the lyricist, the host of You, the magazine columnist, made friends with Endo simply because this album happened. He had established a connection with the game industry because of a xevious remix. He made a whole entire TV show dedicated to the medium of games, not just because he liked them, but because he knew people. Without even making a game yet, he had influenced the industry so effortlessly. Like, just to be funny? If it wasn't for his remark to Endo suggesting he go independent, Game Studio wouldn't exist. Zeta Gundam Hot Scramble wouldn't exist. GMO might not have even happened. Like, am I to believe that the games I covered in this video, from Otocky to Tetris 2 to Earthbound, wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for this album Itoi made with his friends in 1980? Originally, this video was just going to be about a variety of versions of Tetris, and I wanted to play as many versions as I could find to compare them and find my favorite one. One of the easiest ways to do this, while learning through first-hand accounts about the history of Tetris, was in Digital Eclipse's Tetris Forever. It's a good resource, and it's how I first discovered Tetris 2 plus Bombliss, which it gleefully describes as a game with an all-star team, while providing next-to-no context on how it came to be. I am only mildly kidding when I say this is one of the most important games ever released, in terms of its historical position if nothing else. But the lack of info in the official Tetris Anniversary Collection almost obscured this from me. The more I kept finding out about Tetris 2, the more I felt like I couldn't easily cover anything else. The thread, the mild confusion I felt from seeing Endo's name here, it kept unraveling. As much as this brief blurb would want us to think, these aren't just like cool names attached to brands we recognize. Ishihara and Miura may have gone on to do their main things, but at this point in time they weren't known for that. Their work mostly involved weird TV stuff and obsessing over computers and making the original music game. Wait. Toshio Iwai's directorial debut Otocky was the first of its kind, and it owes its existence to xevious. It's the full realization of that Nonomura essay, successfully blending sensations so that the player does in fact play the game like an instrument. As much as it takes influence from its shooting game predecessors, it is far ahead of its time. While Miura and Ishihara gravitated away from TV production into game development, Iwai stuck to the Amiga, and in the early 90s he would move to work on Ugo Ugo Luga. Ugo Ugo Luga. Ugo Ugo Luga. Yeah. This show follows the same experimentalism that TV's TV had, Iwai providing computer graphics hot off the Amiga grill in tandem with a bunch of other artists and animators, blended together into a soup of variety TV for kids to watch before school. The show's segments included Oshiete Eraihito, which featured appearances from special guests talking about whatever it is they do. Here's Hosono. Here's Itoi! Researching this video feels like the You Got the Dud video, but instead of the dud, it's a copy of Mother. It feels like I'm just springing this on you, but Ugo Ugo Luga is the bridge spanning across the rhythm game gap. Toshio Iwai, who designed Otocky and is generally known for experimental music games just like it, worked on a show that had a segment by I Fuck You Not, Rodney Greenblatt, multimedia artist and art designer for a different music game, one that you might have heard of, Parappa the Rapper. Two games I considered essentially unrelated in truth are attached by the glue that is this show, each in the same family of art experiments that began with video game music. And Tetris 2 plus Bombliss it's like the cousin. Why this remains important is because of the broader relationship these two cousins have. Tetris isn't a rhythm game, Parappa is not a puzzle game, but they each pull players in with engrossing synesthetic traits. Tetris has its Tetris effect, the way it just steals a player's attention and pulls them into the rhythm of the game. And rhythm games, I mean, you get the rest. It's why an appealing aesthetic or set of music makes all the difference in Tetris, which I love Tetris 2 plus Bombliss for. Later on the Dreamcast, the developers of Rez took notes from that Toshio Iwai house style to make a new kind of musical shooting game. The designers then quit Sega, formed Q Entertainment, and made Lumines, which is swiftly becoming my favorite game to tell people about. It's a pretty wonderful game, and it first came out on PSP to show off its music playing abilities, so I love it by default, but it planted the seed that later sprouted into Tetris Effect. To me, after looking into this whole mess I just talked about, Tetris Effect is the full realization of the Cytron vision. It beautifully merges an already hypnotic puzzle game with musical input akin to all of this stuff. It's a natural step in a long lineage of synesthetic game design. And it's fun. I like it a lot, but I am just losing my mind over the fact that it wouldn't have happened if all these parallel, half-related things weren't all being worked towards. Because they're not unrelated. Through strands upon strands of game design history, the same road has been paved, and all it took was for a select number of artists and designers to go, wait a minute, this rules. That's why Masanobu Endo is credited in a Tetris sequel from 1991 developed by Chunsoft. That's why Tsunekazu Ishihara worked with the creator of Tetris several times. That's why Haruomi Hosono simultaneously was inspired by and gave inspiration to video games in the 80s. It's also why Lumines is good. You know the Lumines developers also made their own version of Gunpei, the Bandai WonderSwan game that's also the best game ever made? You should play Gunpei. You should really play Gunpei, by the way. I think you should play Gunpei. You should really play Gunpei. Please play Gunpei. I'm no longer asking, you should play Gunpei.